Welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer podcast with coach, encourager, and strategist Anna McLaughlin. If you're a Christian woman who has big dreams rooted in an even bigger God, but most days those dreams feel completely out of reach, trust me, I get it. As a homeschooling mama of 4, entrepreneur, investor, and all around wearer of many hats, I am right there with you. And yet, the Lord invites us to live out our God given purpose now in the midst of the madness. So, let's explore together how we can know our calling and walk in it today with clarity, with courage, with each other. It's time for you to live the life you love and love the life you live. Let's do this thing. Welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer. Today, I have a treat for you. I want to introduce you to Dr. Amanda McNeil. Amanda, thank you so much for being here.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you, Anna, for having me, for sharing a bit of your story with me. I am excited just to share with your crew who are just dedicated to bettering themselves, and I'm honored to be a part of that.
That's wonderful. So, Amanda, give us just a little bit of your background, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, it's hard to condense it to a little because I feel like life is so interesting and how it can take so many different turns. I am a mom and a wife. My husband and I founded a counseling and coaching organization together. We also serve together as associate pastors in our church and lead one of our church's locations. So, being part of church life has been part of my lifelong story. And serving others, loving others, pastoral counseling, that's really a huge part of it. And so, yeah, I went to school to learn how to serve people and have psychology and counseling in my degrees and in my all the little letters that follow my name. Um, but it was all for the purpose of being better equipped to serve people and to make an impact. Our miracle son is 9, so life is all things soccer and karate right now, and it's very fun.
9 is fun. We have 9 too. I like it.
Nice. Yeah, it's a lot of energy, but like they're starting to get the sense of humor and can kind of hang with the
Yes.
the
Yes.
older crowd, so it's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I live in Florida, so it's always sunny here, which is nice.
Good.
Love playing pickleball and all kinds of fun outdoorsy things.
I love that. And one of the things that I've really loved about connecting with you so far is that, there's there can be this sense of we become what we create a little bit. And you just have this expansiveness to you where it's like, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things I love. There are a lot of interests that I hold. And you've got the reason that I wanted to bring you on specifically is you have a book that you've just written. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that author.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Yes. So, my newest book, Overcoming the Overcast, Navigating the Storms of Grief with God, has been out just over 6 months now. And it's been such a gift to be able to impact people. I share a little bit about my own journey through various griefs in my story, but also I tackle some of the psychology behind it, some of the neuroscience that's coming out, and also the Bible and how we see grief throughout faith and what God's posture is toward us. So I really wrote the book as a love letter. Like if I were to sit down to coffee with someone who's navigating grief and they're like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Teach me what you've learned. I just sat down and it would be like a 4 hour long, 5 hour long coffee, but it's all in the book. And just share my heart, my thoughts, my studies, and some light bulb moments that I think God has shown me about navigating grief with faith.
Mm. So, why this topic? Like, what has your heart wanting to lean into talking through grief with people, especially believers?
I think twofold, partly because I have some personal authority in it that, I wouldn't have signed up to choose that, and yet
Yeah.
here we are. Um, Part of my heart actually is to help others expand their definition of grief. That grief isn't just the loss of a loved one. We certainly do grieve when that happens, but grief is processing loss and change and even disappointment
Mm.
of any kind. It's the process we go through emotionally to adapt to the change that we didn't want.
Oh, whoa. It's the process of going through emotionally, what is it? Accepting the change we didn't want? Is that what you said?
Mhm, adapting to it. Yeah,
Adapting to the change that we didn't want. So so how do we know if we're in grief then? What is it? Like, I hear it because when I hear that, I'm like, "Okay, we need a highlighter on that," because that's a any change we don't want, that's a lot, which
for
means
sure.
our children might be grieving over things we think are little too. Is that right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And this is, oh, parenting is so huge in helping our kids learn how to regulate their emotions because for them, they're frustrated. They can't find the shoes they want to wear. To us, it's like, we're already 10 minutes late. Put on any shoes you can find and let's keep moving. Yeah.
Yep, live that this week, this week.
9-year-old, I see you.
Yep.
Uh, big feelings. Yeah, but we can grieve over changing jobs. We can grieve over getting a diagnosis. We can grieve leaving a community because of conflict or moving across the country. There's lots of different griefs that we experience. Now,
Mm.
when we lose a close loved one to death, that's when we experience bereavement. So, grief is sadness over loss. Bereavement is specifically grieving the loss of a close, meaningful person in your life. So oftentimes that's a family member, but that could be a mentor. Or sometimes I've seen people really struggle when a celebrity or a famous author that influenced their life or pastor passes away because of how that person impacted them. So grief and bereavement are two different things. So when I say I've had my fair share of grief, yes, unfortunately, I have navigated many deaths in my life, but I've had to adapt. And there's a whole bunch of tangents I could go into in different types of grief, but that's one part of why I wrote this story is I remember the hardest bereavement I ever had. I was 14 years old when my father passed away, and I remember feeling so lonely. And that's a really common thread people navigating grief and bereavement feel is that loneliness. I remember feeling like no other teenager in the world can relate to me. Even though it was irrational, I remember thinking no other teenager in the world is going to go through this. Like the world is going to end. Jesus is going to return. I'm the last teenager to ever experience this kind of heartache. And then 2 months to the day that my father passed away was 9/11. And all I could remember thinking was, wow, how many teenagers lost their parent today? And so I knew I was one small piece in a bigger picture. Um, and the other part of my heart for writing this book was being a lifelong church kid. I saw so many people pray full of faith for someone's healing, or for someone's salvation, or for some miracle to happen in their life. And when the person with cancer passes away, rather than getting the miraculous healing, or when the miracle doesn't come through the way we prayed it would, or the way we thought it should, I saw that as the catalyst for many people, not just walking away from our church, but walking away from faith entirely. And that truly broke my heart because for me, I thought, okay, yeah, I've been through my fair share of disappointments and storms, but I want to help people really ground their theology in the word and who do we believe God is? Who does he say he is? If we actually believe the Bible, we have to wrestle with some things that don't feel good and some things that conflict with the way we would want it to be. And my heart behind the book is to really help people wrestle with their beliefs on where God is in loss and pain and difficulty, and how we can ask some tough questions or uncomfortable questions or even angry questions and still navigate grief with our faith and hope intact.
And I think that so much is the heart of where I want to rest, Amanda, is like, let's sit there because I've seen it too. And I've recognized in my own life, it's not until I really lay it all bare before the Father that it actually feels like we're getting somewhere. Where those moments, like if I'm not willing to say, how could you do that?
Mm,
And really reckon all the way through to the other side. to go, okay, you're God.
Yeah.
Like, but that's my words. I want to hear from you. Oh, there's so many places I want to go right now. First, like, what do you think it is that causes people in their moments of deepest pain to actually walk away from the Father?
Mm, in my observation, I think it comes from misunderstandings of his character.
Okay.
So even you touched on something. I think a question many people ask, even non-believers, and they'll use this as an excuse, like how could a good God blank to good people? Like whatever it is, how could a good God allow this or permit this? And so if we have the view of God that he is harsh or heartless, that he abandons us, that he doesn't value our pain, that he doesn't value the person who passed away or the faith that we prayed the prayers with and the tears we cried and what we fasted, if we believe that's his character, I'd probably walk away too, because that doesn't sound welcoming or redemptive at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so when we don't understand his character, and here's I think the reckoning that people struggle with so deeply is if he's all powerful and all loving, then why doesn't he just it's that vending machine, right? Why doesn't he just give me what I want?
Yeah. My 9-year-old asks me that too.
I know, we're human through and through, all the way from
Right.
beginning to end.
So, like, maybe his problems are like, why can't I have candy for breakfast or unlimited screen time?
Mhm.
You're a mean mom. How dare you? You know, obviously, we're not talking about something as trivial as that as we grow and our questions grow and our needs grow. But the beautiful parallel is if we actually believe that he is a good father, then he can handle our questions. He can handle our anger or our misunderstanding. He can handle us not seeing the full picture that he sees, that he's weaving through time. And in my experience, he has so much grace and patience for all of our emotions and questions.
Oh, that's so good. I find too it's like if I don't if I start at his word, then at very minimum we kind of come to this place of acceptance and surrender. Just like I may never know. But I
Yeah.
think sometimes in the church we do a disservice by like kind of parading our miracles out, and it's like look what happened because of his goodness. But then also we have losses and he's still good, and we have disappointments and he's still good. And I think there can be this temptation to hide that pain in the shadows and almost say, well, I must not have prayed enough, or look,
Mm,
there was a recipe, she fasted and she brought it before the church and they did a prayer walk and they laid hands and there was anointing oil, and then we start to kind of come up with this, you know, I don't know, just like if I check a checkbox.
yeah.
Um, and I think we talked about this when you and I first connected. There's a pastor who's very prolific in and active in the healing community, and Bill Johnson, I think, and his wife died of cancer.
Mhm.
He preached the next Sunday, and he said something along the lines of, um, "Do I come to God as a vending machine to give me what I want?"
Mm,
And he said, "His ways are completely outside of what I can know. And my job is to love and trust him, even when, and especially when I don't get the answers that I want."
yeah.
So when we come to these moments, as you've done your work with people, what have you found have been tools they've been able to use to go through the grieving process and hold fast to the Father in the midst of that?
Yeah, that's a complex question.
That
I think,
you're welcome. That's all
yeah.
I got.
Yeah, do we have 45 hours? Okay, great.
Yes.
Um, so I like to think of a lot of mental health tools like the visual of a toolbox. There's a lot of different tools that we need in life. Now, if you get like the 500-piece tool set and mechanics aren't really your thing, there's probably a lot of tools you'll never pick up, you'll never use, and that's fine. We might not need every single tool in our lives. Um, but they are just that. They're tools. They're not magic solutions. They aren't formulas or checklists to just pummel our way through. And that's often a lot of times people will show up to a counseling session. It's like, okay, what do I do to fix it? How do I feel better? How do I get past this? And I love the motivation.
Yeah.
And also, healing is so messy. And the best way I can describe it is trauma in any form is visceral, aggressive, and it robs us and it blindsides us to some degree. Healing, and I think this is the kindness of God, is gentle and slow and layer by layer. And while that makes it more sustainable for us to engage in and actually receive and actually be restored and healed in the process, it is so frustrating that it seems like it takes forever.
Yeah.
So some of the two biggest tools I recommend. The first is grief journaling. There's a lot of science about what journaling does for our brains. And while it can be effective to type it on a computer or a phone, it's slightly more effective to actually physically write it with our hand on paper. But or some people really like voice journaling. They'll just talk to text because, like, I'm not a writer, I'm a talker. So I think it's okay to experiment with how journaling can serve you well. But journaling is really valuable because A, it gives you a place to be honest and like no filter. Like I can express the realest of my frustrations without offending anybody in my world. I can weep and wrestle with God in that space. And also, journaling is a form of self regulation where I learn how to name my emotions, but also work through my emotions. Because something I've heard you say before is we can't suppress it and get past it. We actually have to engage it to work through it. And so, a journal is a really safe place to do that.
Mhm.
You don't need anything fancy. It can just be paper. But because I had so many people ask me, I did develop a grief journal that's very simple with some repetitive questions that you check in with over time and you can see your progress. And slowly over time, the questions change. But it's just that, just prompts. Okay, how am I feeling? What do I need? Who do I need to talk to? What support do I need to ask for? So journaling is one. But then I led into the second one. I think one of the second tools is some form of community support. And that can look a lot of different ways. That could look like small group. That could look like a grief support group. That could look like counseling. That could look like talking with a mentor or a pastor or a friend who's gone through challenge. But like I said earlier, grief is so isolating and something cannot heal when it's cut off from the body. So this is a little bit of a graphic image, but Henry Cloud, the author of Boundaries, he's actually authored a lot of books. He describes it as if I chop off my finger and put it in a drawer with a medical book on surgery, is that going to help the finger reattach itself to my body? No, of course not. It actually has to be in connection with the body for it to heal, for the tissues to connect, for there to be life. And so, connection is something that we can often fear in grief because we don't want to overwhelm people. We don't want to make people sad or burden them, or we don't want their pity, or we don't want their platitudes. So, we avoid people. And for a time, and when I say a time, I mean like days, maybe weeks,
Mhm.
that can be helpful, just like we need a sling or a cast to protect our broken bone. But eventually, we have to take the cast off and we have to go to physical therapy and we have to rebuild that emotional muscle that has been wounded.
One of the things that okay, first of all, I'm just pausing there because I'm thinking about those early days where it seems like what no matter what anybody says to you, it's kind of wrong in your own mind,
Yes,
right?
it's very easy to be offended.
Yeah. So let's land there real quick. How do and nothing I don't want anything about this to be quick, but I just need a moment of how do we receive
Mm,
community and allow it to be imperfect when we're in that kind of raw nerve place of just everything hurts and we just I think it's like I want someone to make it better. They can't make it better.
right.
So how do we do that? How do we show up and say I'm going to receive and it's going to hurt because I want them to fix it. They can't fix it. And
Yeah.
in fact, sometimes they're going to say things that are going to make it worse in their attempts to be present. So how do we engage in that complicated space and let someone be there for us in a way that's real without just well, I don't even know what to say without deciding it's not worth it. I'm going to take my toys and go home.
Yeah. I think it's really hard to do that in the moment.
Mm.
But for everyone who's listening, these are some things we can consider now. What does that look like? So maybe we can echo back to this intentionality and this thought when we need the tool.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, there's lots of dichotomies in life. So I think there's an internal and an external to what you're talking about, this receiving of care and community support, as imperfect as it will be inevitably. So internally, one of my pastors says I'm responsible for from the skin in. So
Yes.
yeah, internally, that idea of, okay, there's the story I could tell myself. There's the offense I feel. There's the anger that they can't fix it, or they didn't say the right thing, or they didn't show up for me the way I wanted or needed them to.
Mm.
And I'm allowed to feel that. But what if I'm so clouded and overwhelmed emotionally that the story I'm telling myself isn't completely true? So I think a healthy person, and again, that's hard to access when we are in some deep reeling pain, but a healthy person gives their close people the benefit of the doubt.
Mm.
Um, if if you were playing baseball and you're mad at one of your teammates and they walk past you as they go up to bat, are you going to break their leg because you're mad at them? No, of course not, because if they do bad, you lose the game. And when we remember, if someone is coming to me to offer support, they're for me, even when they mess up, or even when what they said is like nails on a chalkboard. So there's that internal part. I'm responsible to kind of check the story I'm telling myself. Again, really hard to do in the moment. But I think that's something we can practice outside of those deep grief moments to build that fortitude. Um, and then the external, this is really hard because when we're grieving, we don't want to have to implement boundaries or teach people how to show up for us. And yet, how can they know what we need if we don't use our voice?
Yeah.
And so sometimes that might be as simple as, I love you and I need space. I know you care about me, but please don't check in on me until tomorrow.
Yes.
Or, I am so grateful you care about me. Please don't talk about your loss because that feels insensitive. Feels
Mm.
like comparison. It's not as supportive as you think it may be.
Mhm.
Or, I actually don't want to talk about it, but could you clean my bathroom? Thanks. Like, we actually have to ask for what we need, which can be incredibly hard. But I think internal, we're responsible for how we let our thoughts spiral or take them captive. And external, sometimes we have to use our voice.
Hey, Mama, let me ask you a question. When's the last time you gave yourself some white space? I am not talking about a trip to the bathroom alone or even the grocery store. When's the last time you had what I like to call some no one needs me time? For homeschooling entrepreneurs, time like this isn't a luxury. It's actually a key component to a healthy business, homeschool, and family life. So, if you're ready for your next respite, whether it's you by yourself, you and your spouse, or a family trip, join us at our peaceful haven, Just Like Paradise, located on gorgeous Oak Island, North Carolina. This 3-bedroom house is just a short walk to the ocean and nearby restaurants. It has a screened-in back porch with fireplace that is to die for, hot tub, and even a fire pit if you're feeling ambitious. Book through the link in the show notes, and then you have a unique discount code, podcast 100 to get a $100 discount on your stay as a thank you for being one of my listeners. Get your next getaway on the calendar today. One of the things that makes me think of is what I've found in my own story is those moments were actually where love deepened among the
Mm,
people in my life. And I had a couple of moments when I was walking through a deep grief. One of which was somebody had said, "I'm going to show up for you at this time," and it was in kind of a big way. And then the day before came, and that person was like, "I just can't."
mm,
And in the moment, I was like, I felt like that person showing up for me was gonna carry me through the
mm,
days that would follow. And so it had been like, well, that person's coming and that's gonna distract me and help me have this experience and everything's gonna be okay. And in the moment, all I could say was, I know you're doing the best you can. I totally understand. And I'm just gonna need a little bit of time to process because I was really counting on you, but I know I'm gonna be okay. And I
wow,
just need to get off the phone. And that was like the biggest of big girl moments that I could muster in that moment. And
yeah,
then I lived through those next few days and found, oh, there were these other graces that were waiting for me, probably in part because I didn't take that person out and blame them, right? Because I was like, I'm going to believe that the Lord's got something else to carry me during this time. And sure enough, he did. So
mm,
that when we got to the other side, I could circle back and say, hey, I was okay. I was
yeah,
really afraid because I thought you not being there was going to leave a void. I wasn't going to be able to, because it was like the earliest stages of a deep grief. Um, but but what grew in that, I think the unhealthier version of me in the past would have said, can't believe it. This person said, yeah, they'd be there and then they weren't there. And this is how we break relationships, is because we decide it means something about their love for us or
yeah,
the strength of the friendship or whatever it is, and to just realize, wow, they loved me enough to try to do something that was probably beyond what they could do. And and then I just was able to see the Lord show up and carry me through in a different way than I expected. So that person was able to take care of themselves, and I still had what I needed. And then it led to a deeper closeness that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So I love that moment because even in its imperfection on both of our parts, the relationship deepened, you
yeah,
know? And there was just this sense of like gratitude for wanting to be there, gratitude for their effort, and then gratitude for the Lord for carrying through in another way. So I think sometimes it feels so big in that moment because we're devastated. Like it's just can't think, can't function.
yeah,
Um, but there's this possibility. I love what you talked about of just we need to assume the best and just recognize people are doing the best they can. And there's this line I've heard in other places, and my coach says of like we can't give what we haven't received. So in these spaces, we kind of butt up against everybody else's grief stories in their own capacities to sit there too. And so
yeah.
recognizing that of like the people who bring the food and can't even talk about anything other than that. Oh, honey, it's going to be just fine. One day you'll look back on this and not even have an emotion around it, right? Like they're doing the best they got.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So, okay, you did something so beautiful in your book where, and I could almost feel it's like, you know, we kind of know our soul sisters as far as like you've been in the valley of the shadow. I've been in the valley of the shadow,
yeah,
and it's like when you described the mental and emotional experience of grief, I could feel in my body that familiarity
mm,
of like, oh yeah. I call it being underwater. So, like, how can we know? Because I think our culture has a very short span on grief. It's like,
yes, it's
take,
uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah, take a week. Let's get you back to work and back to life as usual.
Mhm.
Talk to me. How can we know that we're in grief, and how can we be there for ourselves or for other people when they're in that space?
Yeah. So knowing we are grieving, knowing what we need requires self-attunement. And some of us haven't really developed that muscle because it feels selfish. Or to your point, it's uncomfortable. So if I don't actually sit with the depths of my pain and my questions with God, with safe voices in my life, I will not be able to sit in the depths of pain with somebody else. So it requires this journey of paying attention to yourself. Even I remember a counseling session with my counselor where I was describing this huge decision I was feeling, and I was very overwhelmed, and I was probably talking without breathing and just like giving it way too many details. And my counselor paused me and she's like, "What are you feeling right now in your body?" And I was like, "Nothing, nothing. I don't feel anything. We can just come on. I want to figure out the answer to this." And it's because we don't pay attention to the toll that pain takes, and we can numb out. Sometimes we see that in very obvious ways when people numb with substances or even overworking or shopping or Netflix or food or whatever. Um, Sometimes the numbing isn't as obvious. And so the first step to knowing where we are at emotionally is actually stopping whatever coping, numbing behavior we are engaging in and paying attention to what hurts and where. And sometimes that's something we can do on our own. Sometimes that's something we can do with a friend or a family member, spouse, pastor, small group, like I mentioned earlier. But sometimes we do need some professional support in what that looks like, depending on what our story is, what we have been through. We might need someone who's trained to sit with us and to guide us into learning what that process looks like. When we become a friend to ourselves, and to clarify, I think this is where what culture would call self-love. But how I view it is when we are truly loving ourselves, it is an echo and it sounds very similar to how God speaks to us. So if we've learned how to receive the love of God, then we're echoing that love to ourself. It's actually not selfish to care for ourselves, to pay attention to what our needs are, to what our pain is. Um, when we can tune in with ourselves, then we actually can identify where it hurts, why, when, and for how long. And then the next step is to be honest about it. And again, I think that's where journaling, where prayer, where counseling sometimes can come in. I have to honestly engage the feelings so that I don't get stuck or continue that numbing suppression cycle. So hopefully that answers like that's what we need to do for ourselves.
Yeah.
And you also asked if we see it in someone that we love. To me, sometimes that's harder because I am a fix it person. Like, even still to this day, as a wife, a mom, a counselor, a pastor, I want to be able to make everything feel better for everybody. And that's just not how life works. It can be really hard to see someone that you love either be numb and not even aware they're checked out or that they're in pain or in denial. So I think obviously praying for our loved ones, but then also sometimes that psychs us out as the support system. And it's like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Or my favorite line that I hear people say is, I don't want to make them sad. And I
Mhm.
just lovingly and cheekily ask, do you think they forgot? Like, do you think they forgot their loved one died? And by you bringing it up, it's like, oh man, this again. No, they haven't stopped thinking about it. And so, as a supporter, being able to say, hey, I don't know if you know what you need, but I'm here. I'm here if you want to talk. I'm here if you want to sit in silence. I'm here if you want to share fun memories. I'm here if you want a distraction. Just letting someone know you care and you're available and being honest, I don't know what to do. That's like gold to someone who may not even know themselves what they need.
Mm. Oh, that's so good. So take me back because one of the things that I think it, because we've talked about like pushing the beach ball back under the water, right? Grieving is uncomfortable. Um, what if someone who's listening is kind of sitting there going, okay, something kind of keeps coming to mind that maybe got pushed down a little bit. Maybe
Mm,
I just decided I'm sick of talking about it, or nobody seems to want to hear it anymore, um, or we just felt like it was time to pick up and keep on moving, or we just didn't know what to do.
mm,
And to your point, like there's the loss of a loved one. there's also all of these other moments in our lives, the loss of a relationship or a move or a job change or change in roles in our lives, even beautiful things like, having children and, well, gosh, now who am I now that I'm mom, now that
Mhm. Yep.
and it can be something that can occur over years where we look back and we go, I think I lost a piece of myself somewhere along the way. So talk to the person who's sitting there going, I think I'm willing to let the beach ball come up. First of
Mm,
all, I have two questions. The first is, why is that a journey worth taking? Why is it worth it for you, friend, who's listening right now and kind of thinking about these little spots? Why is it worth giving yourself that permission to let the emotion out? And then second of all, what's next?
mm,
What's a step that that person can take?
yeah. Firstly, I would commend their bravery
Yes.
to say, yep, I'm feeling conviction, or I'm seeing something, or I'm opening my heart or my mind to something. Secondly, I would say that's a great indication that you're ready to start pursuing healing in that area. Because the reality is, we actually can't pursue deep healing about everything in every season of our life. So, okay, that young mom who is sleepless and nursing in the middle of the night and figuring out what cries mean, and maybe they don't have any family support nearby and they are just surviving. That's not the time to go, let me dig into my childhood trauma. We don't have the capacity to heal in that way in such a demanding season. And so, oftentimes, and I actually even wrote this in the intro of my book, I said, hey, if you're not ready to read this, put it back on the shelf, let it sit for a bit. I'm not offended. Like, rushing into something doesn't always serve us well. And so, when we're feeling that pull of, okay, I think I might want to explore that, that's a great indication it's time. And I think to reduce some of the intimidation or the fear of the unknown, it doesn't mean we're going to deep dive to the bottom of the well and go 0 to 100 in touching that pain point. It is a slow, like I said, gentle, gradual, layer by layer engagement. And so some first steps could be honesty, naming something. I often see in my work that people have a hard time naming painful things about their past because it feels either disloyal to maybe a family member who's harmed them, or a family member who was in addiction, or a single parent who's working multiple jobs and not present. And we know they were doing their best. And so to actually be honest about our pain changes the picture or the story we held of our past. Or in the case of a loved one who's passed away, being honest about the relationship wasn't perfect. Goodness, that can feel disloyal. That can feel uncomfortable when we want to cherish them and remember them in the best of lights. But I always view it as, if we aren't honest that it hurts, then we don't need healing in that area, or we can't receive healing in that area. And so honesty isn't throwing anyone under the bus. It's not being ungrateful. It's not being unfaithful. It's actually inviting the Lord into that space that we can be honest with ourselves first so that we can be honest in his presence.
Mm. Oh, that's so good. And I feel like I want to flag, I keep thinking of one particular kind of grief in all of this. And I don't know if there's someone who's listening that's going to need to hear this one too, but I've noticed there are the griefs that come from choices we ourselves have made. And sometimes I feel like those are some of the hardest ones to really give ourselves permission to heal because it's like, well, I chose.
Yeah.
I chose
It's
to leave
wrapped in
that abuse.
shame.
Yes, exactly. Even when we know we're actually following the Lord's leading or like what's the healthiest for us, like I left that relationship or I left that job or whatever it is, that can you talk about, would you still call it grief if it was rooted in our own choice? Can we still feel grief or is that something
Mm.
different?
I think we can feel grief. We can be sad or have regret over how we handled something, how we didn't handle something, how long we made a choice. Um, and there's a lot of psychology, particularly in the example you gave of being in an abusive relationship. There's a lot of lies believed and manipulation, and um, sometimes there can be a grief or even a berating of ourselves for how come I didn't see it more clearly, or how come I didn't see it sooner. And yet, I think there's this is complicated, but I think we have to embrace the mind of Christ and even just gently ask, how does God view me back then? Because if he wouldn't shame us or berate us or belittle us, what gives us permission to do that to ourselves?
Mm. Oh, someone needed that today. Thank you. That's so good. So it's kind of wrapped up in all of this. You've talked about seeing people turn away from the faith after losing someone or going through a grief. And there's what I'm curious if you would see this as the opposite side of the same coin, which is choosing not to engage in or allow for the fullness of grief for fear of
Mm-hmm.
what almost like what may happen to our faith. So kind of slapping a like God is good all the time adage on it and just pushing it down and pushing it down. So what what do we if we're kind of if someone's on the precipice of going, well, I want to heal, but I'm afraid I'm not going to love the Lord anymore. Like
Mm,
how do I reckon with him and what he, his sovereignty, his goodness, his love, his like all these things he says he is don't seem to compute with this heartbreak that I've had, so I don't even want to go there. What would
yeah.
you say to someone who's just even afraid to open the door because they love the Lord? They don't want to lose their faith, but they're afraid because the grief feels so big.
Mm. I think that feeling intimidated is really human and normal. Like, if I open that box, what all's gonna come out?
Mhm.
What are the consequences when it already feels like my world is shattered? I can't afford to have any more instability or loss. Makes all the sense in the world. And personally, I'm a very big fan of letting God speak for himself. And so I would say, if you're worried about that, tell him that.
Mm.
If you're feeling anger and you're trying not to feel anger, tell him you're feeling angry and let him speak for himself. Because, again, in my experience, he's able to handle even the hottest of our emotions and accusations and frustrations. He is gentle, he is patient, he makes all things beautiful in his time. And it's okay that it's not beautiful right now. It's okay that it's overwhelming. If we're going to hear God, though, that means we have to get closer to him. And I think of it, I actually use the picture of like wrestling with God a lot in my book, but to wrestle with someone to say, hey, I don't like this, or this isn't fair, or I didn't think you would do this to me. To wrestle, we have to be in close proximity.
Mm.
And yet, by being in his presence, he doesn't rush us, but that's where he trades our mourning for beauty and our sorrow for joy and our suffering into peace that passes understanding. And so again, it's not this magic formula of, okay, I'm pissed off. I'm going to go in God's presence and feel better. No, not
Mhm.
necessarily. But it is the process of continually opening the door and inviting him in, no matter how long the negative lasts, that allows him to be part of the process with us.
Mm. It it makes me think, and I've talked about it um, on this podcast, and you and I talked about it, and you gave I'm like, I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, and so
Hopefully, I remember what
we'll
we
just
said.
see. We'll just see. When you and I talked initially, and when we first met, we talked about if I remember right, because I'm just like, I feel like there's, or you might just be able to speak to it even if we didn't talk about it. But when my father passed, his passing was after 25 years as a paralytic. And there was this like larger than life fear of like, he's going to die any day. He has a cold, he's going to die. He has a UTI, he's going to die. We're planning
Mhm.
funerals, we're at the ER, we're in the ICU. And it was just this very, traumatic. It was like, there's this parable of this in from ancient Greece or something. Damocles has like a sword over his head that's held by a hair. It's like just the
Mm.
reminder of mortality. It can go at any moment, and it felt like that. It felt like we had a sword over our heads at all times with respect to my dad. And then when he passed, there was this, just, it was like I was coming up to the edge of the cliff. And in his passing, I stepped over the cliff, and then there was this hand to catch me that I couldn't see,
Mm.
And it was like Indiana Jones with like the pebbles, and you think it's a cliff, but it's really like there's really a ledge right there. And um, and I came through that experience almost with this. I mean, the only phrase I have is like, what can man do to me? Like
Mm.
there was just, here was this thing that had been terrifying for 25 years, and now there's this place of rest. It I feel like everything you've been describing is kind of like that. To me, is the picture that keeps coming to mind. But what is that? Like, why? Because I feel like this is the point. Like, you reckon with the grief, you live through it, you work it out with the father, which I'd done a lot of pre-grieving with my dad because it had been such a long illness. And
Yep.
so I think that's part of why that sense of being held was relatively readily available. Um, but what is that? I guess is
Mm.
my question. That's not a great question, but that's it. That's all I got. What is that, Amanda?
I love that question. To me, I think that is the definition of God's grace. Because the reality is, though for 25 years, absolutely pre-grieving, trauma, anxiety, all of that was your reality. You didn't need the grace for grieving his death because you didn't need it yet.
Yeah.
You weren't there yet. And the moment you stepped into it, his grace abounds. So when I think of that verse, his grace is sufficient for us. That means on a day when I'm chilling, I'm self sufficient, or everything's good, I don't need a lot of God's grace in that moment. When I am devastated, when I have nothing left and I need so much grace, it's like his grace is an expanding clause. And if you need more grace, there's more grace available.
Yeah.
I even think about this in lots of different circumstances. So maybe a young couple who has been married for a while, they're thinking about, do we expand our family with children? I don't know. That's intimidating. I've seen crazy kids, or the world is crazy. I don't know. I'm like, well, yeah, you don't need the grace to parent a kid right now because you're not in that season. But the moment you step into pregnancy, the moment that baby's in your arms, the grace changes. And so I think his grace is sufficient in every season. Um, Sometimes we just don't recognize that.
Oh, and I think that's okay. That's like the perfect promise, I think, for us to sit with as we wrap up. I could keep you on here forever. The 45 hours sounds really nice. Your
Yeah,
family
I can
might
come
have some
back.
thoughts.
Don't worry.
Good. Let's do it again. And I have to tell this story because it was just the sweetest. I bought Amanda's book, and I was carrying it in my purse to get to read it for us to have this conversation. And then met a woman who she like was barely functioning. She was supposed to be checking me into a hotel, and she like I was kind of like really starting to feel that annoyed feeling of like, are you serious? Like, come
Yeah,
on, lady, right?
you have one job.
No. She's completely absent. And she said, and I was like, all right, Lord, help me love here, help me love here, help me be gracious. I'm not in a hurry, for heaven's sake, I'm on vacation. Like, there's no need to worry. And so I got, kind of moved back into that place of love, and everything's fine. She looks up at me and she goes, I'm so sorry. My sister just died, and the funeral's tomorrow. I'm a million miles away. And I just tear up just thinking about this sweet woman. And I'm like, what can I do for her, Lord? And then I said, this is kind of weird, but I have a book on grief in my purse. Would you like it? And so just overcoming the overcast made its way into the perfect hands. And then
Mm.
I reread the intro because just know this, friend. Amanda has the first chapter of her book on her website free. So you can
Yes.
just get if you haven't already fallen in love with her voice, you can get a feel for her voice, a feel for whether it's time to read the book. And she says in that intro, just like she said, if it's not the right moment, just put it on the shelf. And I just thought of that sweet woman of, will she read it now? Will it sit on the shelf for a
Mhm.
few months? So I just want to encourage you, friend, to just, grief is one of those topics we don't want to wrestle with. It brings up, just like we've talked about, those feelings of, am I going to feel lonely? Am I going to feel overloaded? But I just love talking with you, Amanda, about that moment where it's like there's the grace, and even just that choice to say, Lord, I'm going to allow the beach ball to come out of the water. It
Yeah.
might explode out, or I might be able to kind of ease it up, whatever it might look like. And the grace will be there in that moment, because it's there not just for the first grief, but for every moment. Just like you said, Amanda, like we're not always ready in any given moment to wrestle with something. And even my mother-in-law died almost 10 years ago, and I was listening to a song that she danced to at our wedding, and all of a sudden bubbled up again. I was like, Lord, I
Yep.
miss her.
Mm.
Miss her. And I told my husband, I was like, I started crying at that moment in that song. I just miss her. And getting to express it gives it room. It's like more love, just more
Mm.
love for her all these years later. So anybody who's sitting there and going, I can turn the page on this. I can let that fear come out. I can let that anger come out. Oh, Amanda, what you said, the grace is there
Mhm.
to hold you. And this is where love expands, our understanding of God's goodness expands. So I want to extend that invitation, because I do feel like allowing for grief has expanded my relationship with the Lord. But Amanda, what would you say? Any final invitation to someone who's like, yeah, okay, either
Yeah.
I'll feel what I'm already in the midst of, or we'll go back and we'll look
Mhm.
again.
Yeah. I think the last thought on my heart is truly to validate it is hard.
Mm.
You're not crazy or weak for feeling that way, for being intimidated. And this invitation that you've just given of it being worth it is true. And it's okay if it doesn't feel true. It's okay if it feels really far away. It's okay if there's a lot of wrestling between here and there. The sun will shine again because the storm will not last forever.
Amen. Amanda, this has been so wonderful. Thank you for being here.
It's my honor. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Yeah. And we're going to have all the information on the show notes, but anything else you want to share about how people can connect with you?
Yeah, like you said, my author website has the free download for my book. I can give you the link for our coaching website as well if someone's looking for Christian counseling or coaching for grief or any other reason. We are honored to serve. And truly, when I picture part of trading the ashes of my life for beauty, it's moments like this. It's moments in counseling where I get to sit with someone, where I get to share my story. It's part of my redemption story to share about walking through the valley and walking through the fire and the Lord's faithfulness along the way, even when I wasn't faithful and I didn't handle it well. So thank you for sharing your platform with me and giving me this opportunity just to love and to share.
It's been an absolute privilege, Amanda. Thank you so much. All right. And to you, thank you for being here. Thank you for wading into these waters with us. I know it's not necessarily the conversation we always want to have, but it's always a gift, and even more a gift because it's hard. So thanks for leaning in with us. Until next time, you've got this just and only because he's got you. Friend, thank you so much for listening to this most recent episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. So listen, the whole idea behind this mission is that when we endeavor to be brave with our lives, we need to do it together. Belonging is key. So if you resonated with the message from this episode, share it with a friend. Do it together. Thank you again, and never forget, you've got this because he's got you.